Hi, everyone. So I heard there was a fun hangout. I'm Mel Hullings, the head of our clinical data analytics and programming team here at Formation Bio, a tech-driven AI native pharma company. So I'm going to be presenting on data osmosis, rapid absorption of dataset knowledge through GPT-enhanced documentation. So it's been really exciting to be a part of this community and see how everyone here is leveraging AI not only for analytics, but also building out bots and custom LLM tools. So I'm going to share a bit of our experience on rolling out implementation of an enterprise AI tool and how we've addressed some of the challenges others have discussed here today and gotten our teams really into the tool to augment and speed up clinical and analytics workflows. So these concepts apply to any AI tools such as Claude and Gemini as well, but here I'm going to be talking specifically about OpenAI's ChatGPT enterprise system. So I'm going to give a bit of background on ChatGPT tools and then go into how we've trained everyone to get them really using it and using them daily, factored in considerations for pharma that we thought about while we were doing this implementation, and then go through how we're using it in some specific use cases and share some quick wins we've discovered, as well as our learning and next steps to really build out this process. So first, the solution. So GPT can really serve as a catalyst in pharma companies, especially to drive efficiency in the drug development process, and is such a huge opportunity. But when you're going about doing this, you really need to plan it out like an experiment. So generative pre-trained transformer models, GPTs, a type of LLM, present this opportunity to really augment workflows to overcome challenges and inefficiencies if you roll it out effectively within an organization, which a lot of us are seeing as we go through this process and build out our own tools. So implementing enterprise version of these in pharma requires very careful planning, risk assessment, policy development, training, and support. So this is a lot to take on and a big process. And there are a lot of different levels of solutions depending on the underlying data and use cases. But in general, you need to go through this process of getting things set up, training and driving adoption, and then have a plan for how you're going to review its use and the value of the use cases that it's being used for. So those different levels of tools that are available when you do this, any AI chat tool that you go to, think about it as more of a conversation with the internet of information. So whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you don't need to upload any information. These models are advancing rapidly and being trained on more and more information that's freely available. And we really encourage our entire company to talk to them throughout the day and ask questions that you would Google, such as questions about FDA guidelines, and like Vincent talked about, using LLM tools to get to your first draft of R and other code. But then when you kind of hit the limits on that, that's where you need an enterprise solution such as custom GPTs. So this is like setting up your own company's own instance of Google, and then you can put your own information into it. So in these, you would think about them as tools that are trained on specific tasks or topics, whether it's internal or external information, and instructions. So you can think about it like an intern that you're training to help support your workflow. Here, you do need to think about the data that's being uploaded if you're putting internal documents, especially into these tools, since sometimes that can be retained or used to train the models with the vendor, depending on the agreements that you have. But here's where you can upload a lot of information about R packages, like in Nest, and then talk to it about that specific information and help train it on how that conversation should go. And then we also use these types of things for like generating potential data checks or analyses for the data set by putting in the fields that we'll be using. And then beyond that, we'll talk more about limitations of the custom GPTs, but there are other assistant API tools that are available where you can put larger data sets and build out all these really custom UIs on top of these, or connect to them to like Teams. So this is where we're seeing bots being rolled out, where you can ask questions such as like all your HR policies in one bot that you can talk to through Teams like you would your HR team. So in implementing these tools, what you really want to do is make sure that you're doing it in a way where people are using it and then getting their hands on the system. So what you want to talk about when you're setting up your equipment, the most crucial and often time-consuming steps in creating custom GPTs is curating the knowledge that the model will be trained on, and then creating effective prompt instructions like Devin was talking about with prompt engineering. So I'll go into a little more detail, but you have to keep in mind like what knowledge you're collecting and gather all that information, and also think about file size limitations. Just a tip here that we train people on: if you upload knowledge, there's a button in ChatGPT where you have to select code interpreter for the GPT to know to use that information. And sometimes we also account for that in the prompt. So that's where training people on prompt engineering to provide really relevant context and detailed and specific instructions. Like one thing we share is that it helps the models if you use positive phrases instead of negative phrases. So saying like, please do something is more straightforward for the AI to interpret than don't do this. And then, as I talked about, are limits to data that you can upload, but one thing we make sure everyone is aware of is that these tools allow you to upload a lot of information and create this knowledge corpus for your specific GPT. So like an intern trained on something very specific on your team, you could combine PDFs, CSVs, Word documents, free text. You can put all of that into your GPT and then have it also export content in different formats, and then you can also give it instructions. It's not as good at the formatting since it's all free text, but you can have it add HTML code that'll help you with getting documents into like a specific template or format. But you do need to keep in mind that when you're having a conversation, you can only upload 10 files, and when you're training a GPT, you can only use 20 files. And then there's also a file size limit. So you can combine CSVs and tables and PDFs, which I'll show you, but you still will hit that file limit at some point. But one thing that we were able to do is actually create a custom GPT that helps us combine and parse PDFs and build out like one zip file with the information that we want to train something on. So here we've used uploaded a zip file with a bunch of tables and PDFs and asked it to merge specific ones, and then it writes the Python code that actually does that and then creates a zipped file that you can download. So as we all know in this field, we have a lot of regulations we need to follow, and we need to make sure that as we are tailoring these tools, we need to make sure we're complying with the FDA and other regulations, especially if we wanted to ever think about using them in a GXP context or with clinical data. So this is where we think a lot about data governance. So I'm part of the data governance committee, and we've created policies and trainings around this as well. So it's important to think in specific use cases that you're developing if your tools require training on regulated private or public data. So if there's any regulated clinical trial data, especially real world evidence, things that contain PHI and PII, we advise not to use this directly in the system interface. And AI tools, there may be options with the API and more tech support, but AI tools cannot be used to make GXP decisions without further vetting and validation. And then private data, which is where there's a big opportunity with these enterprise solutions to use proprietary and restricted data. We advise to only use those in the company approved enterprise AI tools that have like our ChatGPT instance. And then that system then allows you to consider who has access to the information that the model's being trained on and restrict it to only specific users or teams. And then public data, non-sensitive data is where there's a lot of opportunity to like iterate with these tools and try them out and then build out your database so that you have access to more information, and then there's no restrictions there. So that's where you can really push the limits on the capabilities of these tools. As Devin also mentioned, everyone needs to be aware of the need to fact check with these tools. So thinking about governance, you should always look at exactly how the model is interpreting something, even ask it, because it may define like a certain KPI differently than you would, and then the calculation would be wrong. So you want to check that, look at the Python code that it's generating too. That'll always be available. It also hallucinates. I've had it make up like whole R packages that it didn't know about, but we need to be aware of that and make sure we're asking for references. And then that's where you need to make sure there's a human in the loop in these processes. So they're really more tools built to augment and speed up human workflows. So one area where we were able to leverage the enterprise solution to create a custom GPT with proprietary information was for our protocol-specific documents. We created some custom GPTs because you can combine the protocol and consent forms and study plans and all of those documents, and then restrict it only to the study team so that you could have kind of an intern who knows about the study, can answer questions about protocol assessments, operations, study design, surface things, make sure the documents align. So that was a quick win that we identified on our clinical team that is being used more broadly now too. So now boosting this, our analytics teams are also leveraging GPTs now to quickly explore and support analyses of databases to inform our clinical development. So as we find and ingest more and more data from the literature, from public databases and vendor data, and then the associated documentation, GPTs can really enhance the process that traditionally has been very manual and time consuming to explore these data sets. So think like ct.gov or like FDA drug formulation databases that you can get access to, but then require a heavy lift to explore and figure out where they could be useful. To answer specific questions, GPTs can really speed that up and help you ideate faster. So one area we were able to leverage this was with this public database available from the NIH called the Osteoarthritis Initiative. So there are a lot of like very broad clinical data sets that are made publicly available through protocols like this. This was a large cross-functional academic initiative to make this data available. So now there's a huge corpus of knowledge around the initiative itself, the protocol, all the documentation they provide. There's like a 4,000-page field guide that we had to dig through to spec out some of our analyses, and then a lot of literature, both in the indication and in projects that have been done using this data. So we put all of that into a custom GPT that has helped speed up our exploration of this data set. So it's helped us come up with analysis specs, suggest potential questions that we could ask from the data that's available, and then of course also help us draft our R code to do these analyses. So beyond creating custom GPTs, I also wanted to touch briefly on a lot of the other tools that are available within these systems. OpenAI particularly has developed their own custom GPTs that are have a lot of enhanced capabilities and are already trained on a wide variety of knowledge. So one of them is the Enterprise Data Analyst GPT, and I think we're all seeing a lot of more AI-driven data analysis tools become available. So it allows you to collaborate with your own AI analyst to get from data to insights faster and really chat with your data. So this was a graph that I produced using this, just ingesting one of the tables from the Osteoarthritis Initiative database just to summarize the cohorts. And then it also proactively suggests, provides data insights, summarizes your data, and creates charts really easily. So it supports a lot of file formats. Definitely still think about the data governance piece, but for a public data set like this, it was very easy to throw in there. It comes with all the caveats of hallucination and human in the loop, but it's a pretty powerful tool, especially with lower risk use cases. So of course, in this process, you always want to validate anything to support any sort of GXP or clinical decision, but it actually can be more accurate. Like we're told AI isn't good at math, like there's the strawberry example Devin showed, but because this is actually using AI to create that first draft of code with randomness and uncertainty, but then actually like deterministically executing the Python code that it generates, you can kind of catch errors a little more easily, especially if you really look at the code as well and are familiar with that. So there's points in this data analysis process where you can QC and just use it to brainstorm as well, and iterate fast. When it says analyzing in the UI, that means it's actually running the code, and they connected it to a Python engine. But then here is where we're able to also use GPTs to kind of supplement that as well. So we created another GPT to help us explore the data set and then perform some of the analyses in this analyst tool to be very specific in what analyses we wanted the analyst GPT to do. And then this is where we hit the file limit for a large PDF with that 4,000 page field guide that I mentioned that we just could not upload, and we're exploring using the API to create LLM tool to do that. So overall, I'll share our learnings from what we've been through to sort of reach this equilibrium state where these tools are being used to supplement a lot of our workflows. So number one, have a plan for tool selection, implementation, training to really drive culture and adoption. Two, in pharma, we need to consider data governance, tool limitations, and then potential use cases to manage risks that could be introduced. We need to help our teams find opportunities for quick wins with lower risk knowledge and data. But there are so many opportunities in particularly clinical operations and data analytics where we've been focusing, where AI can really drive efficiency and innovation. So other things we're thinking about, I think we're all thinking about and learning together about how to use these tools in documentation, trial master files, validation and UAT of systems, which requires a lot of documentation, database builds, and how we configure our case report forms and edit checks, data analysis and visualization, very relevant for this group, using R and other languages, and then also new vendor capabilities that are coming out with different AI tools, statistical programming, which I'm sure we'll always be talking about, and then clinical operations as we get to a better state with our data. So we had to do a lot of research to figure this out. So there's resources linked in the references for some of the slides, and I'll also share that later. But let me see if I can look at the chat, if there's any questions. I don't know if we have time.
Hey, Melanie, great job. We are going to leave this up for just about a minute or two as we transition over to the next talk. I'm going to monitor the chat. Sometimes it ends the chat when I join, so let me know if you see anything, or if anybody online watching has a question to ask for Melanie, feel free to post that in the chat now, and we can ask that for her about this work that she's doing. One of the popular questions we get is, will your slides be available? Do you have those publicly available yet, or do you think you'll post them online after the session today?
I'll put them on GitHub and I'll share that.
Ah, perfect. Perfect. It's always a popular question. Oh, here's someone that has a question. How much faster do you expect your trials to be implementing LLMs? Any idea on that one?
I mean, it's not really about the trials, it's about using the LLMs to supplement specific workflows. And I think it's still hard on specific clinical trials to fully automate everything. Like you have to have someone reviewing everything. But I think now the FDA is much more open to using AI, and we'll be using it in that space as we get more guidance.
All right. Well, I think we're going to transition over to the next talk. So we're going to end this one, go back to the lobby and click on the next talk. I think you got the hang of it at this point, and we will see you in the Biogen talk in about 30 seconds. So thank you, Melanie, so much, and we'll see you throughout the conference today.
Thanks so much.